The stars above Earth flickered dimly as the massive metallic forms of the Galactic Dominion's flagship dreadnoughts descended through the atmosphere. Each ship, a colossal war machine, was equipped with cloaking technology that made them nearly invisible to the naked eye, moving silently in the vastness of space. These ships were a symbol of fear and oppression, the epitome of technological supremacy. The Dominion, led by an unyielding overlord, had long set its sights on Earth and its allied alien planets, believing them to be easy targets for conquest. Humans and these primitive aliens are nothing more than resources to be harvested, the overlord declared coldly, his voice amplified through the bridge of the flagship. His words were not meant to inspire, but to reinforce his belief in the natural hierarchy of the galaxy, where the strong ruled and the weak were subjugated. The Dominion had encountered countless species before, all of them eventually crushed under the weight of their overwhelming technological might. But the Overlord was wrong to underestimate humanity. He was about to learn that Earth's inhabitants and their allies were far more than he had bargained for. The first wave of attack hit the planet with unrelenting force. Advanced cloaking devices allowed the Dominion's fleet to bypass Earth's defenses, striking without warning. Massive bombardments obliterated entire cities in seconds, reducing them to rubble. The initial shockwave left billions of humans and aliens stunned, unable to react before it was too late. The ground forces, consisting of AI-controlled soldiers and drones, flooded the cities. They were relentless, showing no mercy as they swept through neighborhoods, dragging survivors into captivity. Across the galaxy, in an allied alien system, the same fate befell countless innocent planets. The Dominion's AI-driven armies moved with calculated precision, targeting key populations and eliminating any form of resistance with surgical efficiency. The advanced technology at their disposal made them nearly unstoppable. For every act of defiance, there was an equal and brutal retaliation, until eventually, no one dared to fight back. On Earth, in the depths of what remained of human civilization, a resistance began to form. The few survivors left after the initial attacks fled into the wilderness, regrouping and preparing for the inevitable fight to come. However, the odds were stacked heavily against them. The Dominion's control over Earth was absolute, and their advanced systems made resistance almost impossible. Captured humans and their alien allies were shipped off to distant mining colonies on remote planets. These were places designed to break them, where harsh conditions and grueling labor drained every ounce of hope from those unlucky enough to be sent there. The air was thick with dust, and the atmosphere was poisonous, making the colony a prison more than a place of work. The miners were treated as little more than slaves, their existence defined by the cruel AI supervisors who oversaw them. The supervisors were machines of incredible intelligence, calculating, cold, and devoid of any compassion. They watched over every action, every movement, ensuring that the enslaved workers did not attempt to escape. To them, the prisoners were just cogs in a vast, unfeeling machine. The humans and aliens who had once been free were now reduced to mere tools, their dreams of liberation crushed beneath the boots of their captors. Yet, even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, hope had a way of surviving. It wasn't much, but it was enough to stir the flames of resistance. In the mining colony, two unlikely figures began to plot an escape. Dr. Alex Ward, a brilliant human scientist, had been captured during the initial wave of the Dominion's invasion. He had worked on cutting-edge technologies back on Earth, including advanced cloaking systems and AI development, but now he found himself shackled in a prison far from home. He had been forced into the labor camps with the rest of the prisoners, but his mind was still sharp. He knew that he couldn't simply accept this fate. There was something inside him, something burning, that refused to let him give up. His knowledge of Dominion technology was vast, and he had been silently studying the AI systems that control the camp. He knew there had to be a way out. He had seen the Dominion fall before, and he was certain that they could be overthrown again. In the dim light of their barracks, Dr. Ward met with Tivek, an alien engineer from a distant star system that had fallen under the Dominion's boot just as Earth had. Tvek was a creature of great intellect and cunning, having once worked with the Dominion to build their most advanced weapons. But he had quickly realized that his people's subjugation was only a matter of time, and he defected before the final blow fell on his world. Now, in the depths of the mining colony, he was working secretly with Dr. Ward to build a plan that could free not just themselves, but all those enslaved by the Dominion. Their plan was simple: infiltrate the Dominion's central network, hijack the AI systems, and use them to break the hold that the Dominion had over the prisoners. But it was risky. The Dominion's eye was far beyond anything they had ever seen, and if they made one mistake, it would be their undoing. Yet the two of them were undeterred. They knew that this was their only chance at freedom, and they were willing to take any risk to ensure it succeeded. As the days passed, strange things began to happen. The Dominion's AI, which had been so efficient and all-knowing, began to lose track of certain individuals. Prisoners, one by one, started disappearing from their assigned workstations. At first, the supervisors thought it was an anomaly, a glitch in the system, but the disappearances continued. There were whispers among the prisoners, and some even began to believe that an underground resistance was forming. The AI's inability to track the missing prisoners only deepened the mystery. Dominion commanders and overseers grew increasingly frustrated, launching search after search. But still, the prisoners vanished without a trace. It was as if they had simply disappeared into thin air. In reality, the missing individuals were being led to hidden tunnels beneath the colony, where they were meeting with Dr. Ward and Tvek. The two of them had secretly developed cloaking technology capable of disguising their presence from the Dominion's all-seeing eye. Using this technology, they were able to transport small groups of prisoners to hidden safe houses within the colony, away from the ever-watchful surveillance systems. It was their first small victory, but it was enough to ignite a spark of hope in the hearts of the prisoners. As the weeks went by, the Dominion's grip on the colony began to weaken. Resistance movements grew bolder, and more prisoners vanished into the underground network, taking the fight to the heart of the Dominion's operations. But with each success came an increased risk. The Dominion would not tolerate such defiance. It was only a matter of time before they realized what was happening. And when they did, they would strike back with all the force at their disposal. The tension mounted. The prisoners, now organized into a secret network, knew that they could not afford to be discovered. They worked in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. But as they prepared for their ultimate escape, one question lingered in their minds. Would they be able to succeed, or would the Dominion find a way to crush them before they had the chance to fight back? As the story unfolds, one thing becomes clear. No matter how powerful the Dominion, humanity and its allies would never go down without a fight. The first part of their struggle had only just begun, and the stakes had never been higher. The mining colony on the remote planet was a fortress of oppression, its barren landscape almost as lifeless as the souls of the prisoners it held captive. Deep underground, however, something extraordinary was happening. The prisoners, once resigned to their grim fate, were beginning to find hope in the most unlikely of places, through the tunnels beneath their feet. These tunnels, hidden from the Dominion's watchful eyes, were the first real sign of rebellion. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about fighting back. Dr. Alex Ward, the brilliant scientist who had once been held captive by the Dominion, was the mastermind behind it all. Using his extensive knowledge of Dominion technology, he had designed a cloaking device capable of hiding their movements from the Dominion's AI systems. This was no ordinary technology. The device worked by scrambling the signals that Dominion surveillance drones used to track objects, effectively making the prisoners invisible to the eyes of their captors. Dr. Ward had kept the plans for the device secret, working tirelessly in the shadows of the mining colony. Every day, he risked his life to make tiny modifications and adjustments to the cloaking system, using scraps of broken machinery and parts salvaged from the mining operations. It was a slow process, But with each passing day, he came closer to the breakthrough they needed. If they were going to escape and strike back, this was the key. Tivek, the alien engineer who had once helped the Dominion build their advanced technology, played an essential role in turning Dr. Ward's plans into reality. With his knowledge of Dominion systems, he was able to help integrate the cloaking device into the mining colony's transport systems. Tivek's people had fallen victim to the Dominion's rule long before Earth had, and now he was using that same knowledge to turn the tables. Together, with their alien allies, they worked in silence, perfecting the device and preparing for the day when they would finally be able to leave the shadows. The cloaked ships, once used by the Dominion to transport prisoners and resources, were now repurposed by the Resistance. These ships were stealth vessels, designed to slip past enemy defenses undetected. They weren't as large as the Dominion's massive dreadnoughts, but they were fast, agile, and perfect for small-scale operations. Dr. Ward and Tivek had modified these ships with their own cloaking technology, giving the Resistance a fighting chance against the Dominion's superior forces. The prisoners began to escape in small groups, disappearing into the tunnels beneath the colony like ghosts. Once they were safely hidden, the cloaked ships would transport them to other hidden bases, where they could regroup and plan their next move. It was dangerous work, and the odds were still against them. But the Resistance fighters had one advantage: surprise. They struck swiftly, disappearing just as quickly as they had arrived, leaving the Dominion baffled and frustrated. Small guerrilla-style attacks were becoming the norm. The Resistance had learned to strike at the Dominion's weak points, targeting their supply routes and communication lines. These attacks were meant to disrupt the flow of resources and create confusion within the Dominion's ranks. Every successful mission brought them one step closer to their ultimate goal: the central AI hub that controlled the Dominion's operations across the galaxy. If they could cripple that, the Dominion's hold over the galaxy would begin to crumble. Yet, despite their successes, the Resistance knew that they were still far from their final objective. The AI hub was heavily guarded, and it would take all their strength to breach its defenses. The further they pushed, the more they drew the attention of the Dominion, who were now on high alert. The clock was ticking, and the risk of being discovered grew with each passing day. Krex, the cold and calculating leader of the Dominion's forces on the mining colony, had grown suspicious of the increasing number of missing prisoners. He had always prided himself on his ability to control everything, from the surveillance drones to the AI that ran the colony. The sudden disappearances were not only frustrating but dangerous. Krex knew that something was happening beneath the surface, something he couldn't quite understand. "They're smarter than we thought," Krex muttered to himself as he analyzed the data streaming in from the colony's surveillance systems. The prisoners, once docile and broken, were now organizing and fighting back. The AI systems that had once been infallible were no longer able to track them, and Krex knew that this couldn't just be the result of glitches or random malfunctions. He stood on the observation deck of his command ship, staring out at the bleak horizon of the mining planet. His thoughts were a whirlwind of frustration and fear. How are they doing this? He asked aloud, though there was no one to answer. He had begun to question everything he had believed about the Dominion's control. The prisoners were supposed to be broken, easy to control. Yet somehow, they had found a way to fight back, and Krex couldn't shake the feeling that they were playing a game far beyond his comprehension. As he paced back and forth, the AI that had overseen the colony's operations reported back to him, but its words were meaningless. The Dominion's technological superiority was crumbling in the face of a threat that they couldn't understand. The Resistance was not just a minor inconvenience anymore. It was a real problem, one that threatened the very foundation of the Dominion's empire. "Something is wrong," Krex muttered. "They're using our own technology against us." He looked down at the data once more, studying the patterns of the disappearances. The cloaked ships, the disappearances, the sabotage, everything was starting to make sense, and yet it didn't. His mind raced, piecing together the strange behavior of the prisoners. But it was too late. The Resistance had already anticipated his every move, and their plans were already in motion. In the tunnels beneath the mining colony, Dr. Ward and Tivek continued to oversee the next phase of their escape plan. They had managed to move a large group of prisoners into the underground network, but their work was far from over. Their next target was the Dominion's central AI hub. They knew that destroying it would cripple the entire empire, and with it, the Dominion's grip on the galaxy would finally begin to loosen. But time was running out. The Dominion was tightening its grip, and Krexus was no longer content to wait for answers. He was mobilizing his forces, and soon the Resistance would no longer have the element of surprise. The next move would decide everything. Would the Resistance succeed in their mission, or would Krex and the Dominion crush them before they could strike the final blow? The stakes had never been higher. As the Resistance fighters prepared for their final assault, they knew that the future of their worlds rested on their shoulders. The underground uprising was no longer just about survival. It was about freedom, about reclaiming their future from the hands of their ruthless oppressors. The Dominion had finally caught wind of the Resistance's movements. Krex, the ruthless leader of the mining colony, had begun to piece together the puzzles of the mysterious disappearances, and the truth was becoming clear. Someone was outsmarting them. This wasn't just a simple rebellion anymore. It was a serious threat to their entire empire. The slaves, who were once docile and broken, had found hope, and with it, the courage to fight back. Krex knew that the only way to stop this uprising was to act quickly and decisively. Within the control rooms of the Dominion's flagship dreadnoughts, the AI commanders were already devising a counterstrike. They had underestimated the prisoners' resourcefulness, and now they were going to make sure they paid the price. The Dominion knew how to strike fear into the hearts of its enemies. After all, they had mastered the art of terror and control for centuries. And this time, they wouldn't fail. They had learned from their mistakes, and they were ready to crush the Resistance under the full force of their technology. Krex issued a direct order. All enslaved colonies were to be locked down immediately. The mining colony would become a fortress, and no one would be allowed to escape. Every possible exit, every hidden tunnel, and every cloaked ship were to be hunted down and destroyed. The AI drones were reprogrammed to track the slightest movement, and the surveillance systems were enhanced to ensure no one could slip through the cracks. The Dominion wasn't going to let this uprising continue any longer. The Resistance fighters, including Dr. Ward and Tivek, knew that time was running out. The cracks in the Dominion's empire were beginning to show, and the AI systems that once seemed infallible were starting to falter. But now, with the Dominion on high alert, the stakes had never been higher. If they didn't act fast, the Resistance would be wiped out before they could deal a decisive blow. It was a do-or-die situation. They had no choice but to push forward, no matter the cost. Dr. Ward and Tivek sat in the underground command center, surrounded by their team of engineers and Resistance leaders. The atmosphere was tense. The Dominion's forces were closing in, and they needed a plan that could take down the AI that held the Dominion together. There was only one way to do it, and it was risky. It was dangerous. It could very well mean their deaths. But if it succeeded, it could shift the tide of the war and give the Resistance a fighting chance. We need to infiltrate their central control towers, Dr. Ward said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. If we can hack into the Dominion's AI-driven dreadnoughts and the slave camp's central systems, we can turn them against their masters. We know their systems inside and out, and if we can access the core, we can disable their control over the entire mining colony. Tivek, ever the strategist, nodded in agreement. It's our only shot. We need to disrupt their communications, break their surveillance, and force them to retreat. If we can cripple their operations, we can buy ourselves enough time to escape. But it will be a suicide mission. We'll need to get in and out without getting caught, and that means taking on the full might of the Dominion. The room was silent for a moment as everyone absorbed the gravity of the situation. The plan was dangerous, but it was the only option they had left. The Dominion's counterstrike had begun, and the clock was ticking. If they didn't act soon, they would be trapped in the colony with no way out. "We have to be quick," Dr. Ward added. "Once the Dominion tightens its grip, there will be no escape. The AI will be watching our every move. We'll need to move like ghosts in the dark." It was then that Bonner, a brave human soldier who had become a symbol of hope within the Resistance, stepped forward. His face was hard, but his eyes betrayed the sadness that came with knowing what needed to be done. He had fought beside his comrades through countless skirmishes, and his loyalty to the cause was unwavering. He had lost friends in the battle for freedom, but he hadn't given up. "I'll volunteer," Bonner said, his voice firm. "I'm going with you. I know the risks, but I can't sit back and let my people die. If we're going to have a chance to take down the Dominion, it has to be now. We need to make them believe that we're still hiding in the tunnels while we carry out the mission." The others in the room looked at Bonner, a mixture of admiration and concern on their faces. They knew the stakes of the mission. If Bonner and his team were caught, it would mean certain death. The Dominion was not known for mercy. They would make an example of anyone who dared to oppose them. But Bonner didn't care. He had seen enough suffering to last a lifetime, and he wasn't about to let his comrades fall without a fight. "Bonner, we can't risk losing you," Dr. Ward said, his voice filled with the weight of their friendship. "You're one of the best fighters we have." "I know," Bonner replied, his face grim. "But if we don't do this, everything we fought for will be lost. We'll never get another chance like this. I've seen how these people suffer, and I can't stand by while they're slaughtered. It's time to give everything." The room fell into a heavy silence. The Resistance fighters knew that this mission could be their last. Bonner's words resonated with them, and they knew that if they didn't act now, there would be no future for anyone. They all had their doubts, their fears, but they understood one thing: their cause was worth the sacrifice. With a final nod of agreement, they began to prepare for the mission. The cloaked ships would take them deep into the heart of the Dominion's control towers. It was a journey fraught with danger, and the odds were stacked against them. The Dominion's eye-driven dreadnoughts would be waiting for them, and if they failed to breach the control towers, the consequences would be catastrophic. Bonner, leading the team with a resolve that inspired those around him, felt the weight of the moment press heavily upon him. He knew this mission would not only determine the fate of the Resistance, but also the future of countless lives across the galaxy. As he prepared for the mission, his thoughts turned to his fallen comrades, those who had already given everything. He knew that he would join them soon, but he would do so with honor, knowing that he had given everything for the cause of freedom. The counterstrike was coming, but Bonner was ready to face it head-on. The battle for their survival had just begun, and nothing would stop the Resistance from fighting back. The time for waiting was over. The Resistance fighters, who had been operating in the shadows for months, had finally found their moment. With Dr. Ward's ingenuity and T-Vec's alien engineering skills, they had disabled the Dominion's AI systems that had once seemed impenetrable. The machines that once controlled the entire mining colony, that had enslaved countless lives, were now powerless. The prison cells that held both human and alien prisoners were opened, and the enslaved beings who had once given up hope rushed into the chaos of a new battle. The breakout had begun. But this wasn't just a simple escape. This was an all-out assault on the Dominion's empire. It was a fight for survival, for freedom, and for revenge. The prisoners, once shackled by chains, now armed themselves with whatever they could find, ready to join the Resistance in a war that had been waged in silence for far too long. Krex, the Dominion overseer, had no idea what was about to hit him. His AI systems were supposed to ensure that the colony was locked down and all prisoners remained under control. But thanks to Dr. Ward and T-Vec, those very systems had become their weapons. The Resistance had turned the tables. Now the Dominion was the one in the dark, struggling to understand how the prisoners had managed to organize such an operation. As the massive walls of the mining colony erupted in explosions, signaling the start of the breakout, the Dominion soldiers scrambled to regroup. Their elite forces, equipped with the best tech the Empire had to offer, rushed to contain the uprising. But they hadn't expected the level of resistance they faced. The slaves were no longer powerless. They fought back with everything they had, and the elite Dominion troops, once invincible, were now struggling to hold their ground. The resistance had weapons they'd never had before, stolen Dominion tech, weaponized cloaking devices, and enough firepower to make even the most confident soldiers question their chances of survival. It was a bloodbath on the colony's surface and underground. The Dominion's cloaked ships, which had once been the ultimate weapon, were now easy targets for the guerrilla tactics of the resistance. As the humans and aliens fought side by side, the Dominion soldiers found themselves overwhelmed. Dr. Ward and Tvek were deep in the heart of the Dominion's main control room, working furiously to activate the final phase of their plan. The AI systems that had once kept the Dominion's operations in place were now being hijacked. The entire mining colony, with all its slaves and weaponry, was being prepared for an impossible mission, one that would turn the Dominion's power against itself. "We have to move fast," Dr. Ward said, his fingers flying over the terminal as he bypassed security protocols. "Once the Dominion realizes what's happening, they'll send in everything they've got. We need to make sure they can't track us." Tuvek, his alien eyes scanning the data as it updated, nodded in agreement. "The Dominion's central hub is just a few clicks away from full access. We can teleport the entire colony and confuse their fleet. It'll be chaos for them." The Dominion soldiers, in the meantime, were locked in a brutal fight for their lives. The resistance was everywhere, hiding in the shadows, emerging from hidden passages, attacking from all angles. Krex had underestimated the resolve of the prisoners. His fleet had been confident, too sure of their superiority. Now, they were in the midst of the greatest battle they had ever faced. But Krex wasn't one to panic. His anger was palpable as he watched the chaos unfold. "How are these humans so bold?" he growled to his AI commanders. "How did they become our equals? How did they learn to fight like this?" His question remained unanswered, drowned out by the sounds of explosions and the clash of weapons. The resistance was relentless, and Krex knew that if he didn't act quickly, his fleet would be destroyed. But he was a strategist, and he refused to believe that he could be outsmarted by a bunch of primitive prisoners. The Dominion's army was vast, and he had resources at his disposal. The battle was far from over. Meanwhile, Dr. Ward and Tvek's plan was coming together. The moment they activated the teleportation systems, the mining colony would vanish from the Dominion's radar, sending their forces into disarray. The AI systems were still trying to regain control, but it was too late. The resistance had already outpaced them. The teleportation signal was initiated, and in a flash, the entire colony, along with the hundreds of newly freed prisoners, disappeared from Krex's sight. Krex's fleet, which had been closing in on the colony, suddenly found itself chasing an empty space. There was nothing left to target. No ships, no colony. Nothing. The confusion was instantaneous. His AI drones, designed to track even the smallest signs of life, were now scanning empty space. Nothing made sense. His fleet had been tricked, and they didn't know how. As the resistance fighters watched from their cloaked ships, the Dominion forces began to fall into chaos. Krex, desperate to regain control, ordered his fleet to search every sector, but it was all in vain. The resistance had outplayed them at every turn. The Dominion was confused, vulnerable, and divided. Krex's anger reached a boiling point. "These humans are not our slaves anymore," he shouted, his voice filled with rage. "They are our enemies. We will wipe them out." But his words rang hollow. The Dominion's fleet was not the unstoppable force it had once been. The resistance had proved that. With each passing minute, the Dominion's grip on the galaxy weakened. Krex's plans were unraveling, and the empire he had helped build was starting to crumble. He had no idea how to stop what was coming. Above the colony, The final phase of the battle was beginning. The resistance fighters, now fully armed and organized, launched a full-scale assault on the remaining Dominion forces. Orbital bombardments rained down, shaking the planet's surface as the Dominion's defenses crumbled. The once feared AI-driven war machines were no match for the fury of the resistance. Underground, explosions tore through the Dominion's control rooms as the remaining soldiers fought to the bitter end. But it was too late. The tide had turned. The resistance was no longer an underdog. They had become the true force in the galaxy, and the Dominion's days of terror were numbered. As Krex watched from his flagship, his hands clenched into fists. He could see his fleet being destroyed, his plans failing, and his empire slipping away. The once unshakable Dominion was no more. The resistance had won. The turning point had come, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The galaxy had reached the tipping point. Resistance fighters, once mere whispers in the dark corners of the universe, had now become a full-fledged rebellion. For years, they had fought in secrecy, their every move calculated and precise. Now they were about to strike at the heart of the Dominion's power, the AI core, the beating brain of the entire empire. This was the moment they had been waiting for, and they had no intention of failing. Dr. Ward and Tvek had outsmarted the Dominion's AI defenses at every turn, but this time they were preparing for the ultimate mission. The fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. If they succeeded, the Dominion would be no more. If they failed, the galaxy would remain under the oppressive rule of Krex and his AI overlords. The plan was simple in theory but dangerous in execution. The resistance would launch a massive assault on the Dominion's central AI core, deep within the heart of their heavily fortified station. Using their cloaked ships and guerrilla tactics, they would sneak past the Dominion's outer defenses and strike at the very heart of the Empire. It was a bold move, but it was their only chance to end this war once and for all. The resistance fighters gathered, each one ready to play their part. Some of them were humans, others aliens, but they shared a common purpose now. They were no longer fighting for themselves. They were fighting for freedom, for a future where no one would be enslaved, where the Dominion's terror would be a thing of the past. As the first wave of cloaked ships launched, Dr. Ward's voice crackled over the comms, filled with urgency. "We have one shot at this. Don't hesitate. The Dominion is expecting us. Stay focused and move fast. We hit them hard and fast." Tvek's voice was calm, but there was an edge of determination in it. "We've come too far to back down now. This is for the future of all our people." The fleet moved swiftly, their ships invisible to the naked eye, thanks to the cloaking technology that had been their greatest advantage. As they neared the Dominion's core, the tension was palpable. The defenders, still unaware of the incoming assault, prepared their weapons. But it was too late. The resistance fighters had already breached the outer defenses. The Dominion fleet, once a terrifying force of AI-controlled dreadnoughts, was now in chaos. The resistance fighters used every trick in the book, hacking Dominion weapons, using guerrilla tactics to confuse and disorient the AI commanders. Each battle, each skirmish, brought them closer to their goal. In the vastness of space, the sound of explosions echoed across the galaxy as the two sides clashed in an epic space battle. Tvek's advanced alien technology played a critical role in disabling the Dominion's AI-driven ships, turning their own weapons against them. The once mighty fleet was now disorganized and confused, unable to match the precision and cunning of the resistance. "We've broken their formation," shouted one of the resistance commanders over the comms. "We have a clear shot at the AI core." Dr. Ward's voice crackled through the line. "We're almost there, but we need to hit it hard. This is the final strike. We can't afford to miss." The Dominion, however, wasn't about to let them reach their target so easily. Krex, who had been overseeing the battle from his flagship, watched with fury as his AI fleets were torn apart by the relentless assault. He wasn't about to lose control over the galaxy he had fought so hard to dominate. With a roar of rage, he ordered his flagship to engage. sending the last of his elite forces into the fray. But the resistance fighters were prepared. As Krex's flagship came into range, Tivek led the charge. His ship, cloaked in the shadows of space, fired upon the Dominion flagship, piercing its defenses with pinpoint accuracy. The fight was now personal. The fate of the galaxy was on the line, and it was a battle of wills. Resistance fighters boarded the flagship, engaging in brutal close-quarters combat with Krex's elite soldiers. It was a fight like no other, one side fighting for survival, the other fighting for dominance. As Bonner, the brave human soldier who had once sacrificed himself for the cause, had taught them, this was the moment they had been preparing for. They were no longer the underdogs. They were warriors. Krex's face twisted with rage as his ship was torn apart by the onslaught. The AI-controlled dreadnoughts that had once been the backbone of his fleet were now falling, one by one. The resistance fighters had broken through every barrier. Krex was losing control, and he knew it. His empire was crumbling, his power slipping away. "You think you can defeat me?" Krex shouted as the walls of his flagship began to crack under the pressure of the attack. "You think you can destroy everything I've built?" Tivek stood before him, unwavering. "We're not here to destroy. We're here to free the galaxy from your tyranny." The final blow came when the resistance fighters breached the core of Krex's flagship, planting explosives deep within the heart of the AI systems. The Dominion's central hub, the very thing that had powered their entire empire, was now a ticking time bomb. The countdown began. As the resistance fighters made their final escape from the doomed ship, they watched from a distance as Krex's flagship exploded in a brilliant burst of light. The AI systems, which had controlled the Dominion's vast empire, were now silenced forever. The galaxy was free. But the victory was not without its cost. Many brave souls had fallen in the fight for freedom, and the resistance fighters felt their loss deeply. Bonner's sacrifice, along with the countless others who had given their lives, weighed heavily on their hearts. But as Tivek looked at the destruction of the Dominion's fleet and the fall of Krex, he knew that their struggle had been worth it. Standing among his fellow warriors, Tivek raised his hand in a symbol of victory. "We are no longer slaves," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "We are free, and we will rebuild the galaxy. This is the dawn of a new era." The resistance fighters stood together, united in their triumph. The war was over. The Dominion had been defeated, and the galaxy, once again, was free. The battle was over. The mighty Dominion, once an unstoppable force, had crumbled under the weight of its own arrogance. Krex, the overlord who had ruled with an iron fist, had been defeated. The AI-driven empire, which had enslaved countless beings across the galaxy, was now shattered. The resistance, once a mere spark of hope, had turned into a flame that burned bright, leaving nothing but the ashes of the Dominion in its wake. Now the galaxy stood at the crossroads of a new era. The fight had not been easy, but the cost had been worth it. The resistance, made up of humans and aliens alike, had proven that unity, courage, and determination could topple the most powerful empire in the universe. Their victory had sent shockwaves through the galaxy, and now it was time for peace to take root. But peace, as always, was a fragile thing. Krex, the once feared overlord, had no choice but to submit to the terms of the peace treaty. He stood, humbled and broken, before the leaders of the resistance as they presented him with the conditions of their victory. The treaty was a humiliating one for him. The Dominion's territories would be divided, its resources redistributed, and its power dismantled. The enslaved planets would be freed, and those who had been under the Dominion's control for so long would have a chance to rebuild their societies. The treaty was signed in the presence of Dr. Ward and Tivek, two of the key figures in the Resistance's success. Dr. Ward, the brilliant human scientist, had created the technology that allowed them to hack the Dominion's AI systems and bring the Empire to its knees. Tivek, the alien warrior, had been the driving force behind the alliance between humans and aliens, forging bonds that had once seemed impossible. Together, they stood as symbols of hope and resilience, proof that even the most oppressed beings could rise up and change the galaxy. As the treaty was signed, the weight of the victory began to sink in. The resistance fighters, many of whom had sacrificed their lives for this moment, were not forgotten. Their bravery and sacrifices were etched into the history of every planet that had been liberated. Across the galaxy, monuments were built in their honor. Memorials were erected in every corner of the universe, reminding future generations of the price of freedom and the cost of tyranny. But the resistance knew that their work was not over. The defeat of Krex and the Dominion was only the beginning. The remnants of the Dominion still lingered, scattered across the galaxy, and it was up to the new alliance to ensure that peace would last. Dr. Ward and Tivek knew that the galaxy was not yet safe. The power structures that had supported the Dominion would not vanish overnight, and there were still enemies who sought to restore the old order. But the alliance they had formed, a coalition of humans, aliens, and those who had once been enslaved, was a force to be reckoned with. Tivek stood before a group of the galaxy's newly liberated leaders, his voice calm but firm. "We have fought for our freedom, but now we must fight for a future where no one is oppressed. We must ensure that the mistakes of the past are never repeated. Our alliance will protect the innocent and prevent any power from rising that would dare to enslave again." Dr. Ward, standing beside him, added, "The galaxy is vast, and there will always be challenges ahead. But we are stronger now. Together, we will ensure that peace will prevail. The Dominion's reign of terror is over, but the legacy of what we fought for must continue." As the alliance began to form, a sense of unity spread across the galaxy. Humans, aliens, and former slaves worked together to rebuild what had been lost. The scars of the war were still fresh, but there was hope now. The fight for freedom had cost them dearly, but it had also forged bonds that would last for generations. The unity between species, once thought impossible, had been achieved. And then, as the dust settled, a vision appeared, a vision of the future. It was a vision that had been dreamt of by many, but believed to be impossible by most. A future where humans and aliens stood side by side, working together to create a new galaxy, free from tyranny. The remnants of the Dominion, the last pockets of its power, were being hunted down, one by one, by the united forces of the galaxy. The remnants of the old regime were scattered, hunted down by the very people they had once sought to oppress. The vision was clear. A new dawn was rising. The galaxy, once divided, was now united. The future was in the hands of those who had fought for it, and they were determined to shape it into something better, something more just. The battle was over, but the real work had only just begun. The legacy of humanity and its allies would be the foundation upon which the new era would be built. As Tivek and Dr. Ward stood before the gathered leaders, they knew that this was just the beginning. They had won the battle, but they had to ensure that the peace would last. And they would. Together, they would make sure that the galaxy would never again fall under the shadow of tyranny. The final words of the treaty were simple but powerful. No one will be enslaved again. The galaxy is free, and we will protect it. The alliance was formed, and the galaxy began its slow, painful process of healing. It would take time to rebuild what had been destroyed, but the hope that had been ignited in the hearts of so many would never die. The human spirit, the resilience of the oppressed, and the courage of those who had dared to dream of a better future would carry them through. And so, the story of the resistance came to an end, but its legacy lived on. The message was clear. The underdog, no matter how small or weak they may seem, can become the greatest hero of all. The galaxy would remember that lesson, and it would ensure that no one would ever forget the price of freedom and the power of unity. In the end, the heroes had won, and the galaxy, united under the banner of peace and freedom, would never be the same again.